Welcome to another episode of Talking Expat Taxes. I'm your host, Alex McGowan with McGowanTax.com, where we help international individuals and small businesses with their international tax planning and compliance and making sure you're not penalized and saving taxes as much as possible. So today we're going to talk a little bit outside of my normal box and talk about technology, and technology in general. It's a growing field, obviously, and that growth is compounding. So like as the use of technology grows, it grows more. It's kind of like a snowball rolling down the hill, right? And for me, that triggers, some different feelings, emotions as I navigate it. One being it's a little frustrating in some ways because I feel like I'm always behind the curve. That's hard to keep up with. But another one would be fear. Is this going to take over the accounting profession? Is it going to take over what I do? And the other one would be opportunity. It could also allow me to do more of the stuff I like to do and get rid of the stuff I don't like to. And obviously that's from an accounting professional perspective. If you're a taxpayer out there, which is most of the people listening to this podcast, it has a similar type of feeling. Is it going to allow you to do more things yourself? Is it going to change the way you're interacting with your accountant and tax professionals today? And the answer is certainly yes. It's just how, and when. So today we're very fortunate to have somebody that knows a lot more about that than me, Felipe Salinas, who's been working on this stuff for a while. Created his own firm, specifically focused on AI for the tax and accounting professionals. But Felipe, great to have you on. And yeah, I'll let you kind of jump in and explain a little bit about what you've been doing and some of your background in this stuff.
Of course. So Alex, thanks a lot for having me. I'm super excited. I think more and more I see tax professionals adopting AI and technology, like contrary to what people would think, like accountants are pretty like future forward thinking. And I like that. So a bit about my background. I was originally born in Bogota, Colombia in South America, but I became an expat really quick. I started traveling abroad. I lived in Brazil. I lived in Mexico. I lived in Europe for a bit. And I'm not a CPA by profession. I ended up in taxes and specifically in the international taxes by accident. I was working for a venture capital firm in Brazil for almost 3 years. And I was a product lead there. I was doing company formation products and legal and compliance products for founders that would raise venture capital. So I don't know if you know this, but in Latin America, funds don't invest locally. They invest in offshore vehicles. So this is US holding companies or what's so-called the Cayman sandwich, which is a Cayman holding company, US pass-through, and then subsidiaries abroad, mainly in Latin America in this case. So that's how I came related to international tax.
I got you. So you were preparing those forms basically as helping prepare the
Yeah.
forms.
So I'm going to tell you a bit about my background. Then I'm building Taxflow. Taxflow is AI for international tax preparing. So imagine a senior tax accountant with AI, right? It's an artificial intelligence staff accountant that will help you do several of the workflows, either data intake, which is the information requests, all of the processing of the work papers, which is getting a bunch of data, unstructured data, and then the data entry itself. Because as you know, many of the tax softwares are very legacy, and then you have to input everything manually. There are no APIs for this. So we're tackling those three things specifically.
Okay. Yeah, very cool. And that's what got you and I together, honestly, because it's for me, that's a huge part of this. I mean, I'll just say from my perspective, like the way I've been, watching and trying to engage in the growth of technology in the accounting profession, it's kind of grown from, a glorified Google machine, right? It's like that was kind of step one was, all right, this thing can actually answer questions for me and I don't have to just read through 12 articles to figure out the answer to this. It's also a little bit dangerous because it's just going to tell you an answer and you have to know if it's right or wrong or what you can rely on and what you can't. So that's been, and I have seen it get better, obviously, which has been kind of interesting to see in a short amount of time, different tools out there, it's gotten better. But the next phase of this, which, got me plugged in with you is instead of just using it to help you find answers online, how do you use it to make my processes with my firm more efficient, take cutting
Yeah.
so that I can ultimately provide a better service to my clients. That's the ultimate goal, right?
So
So,
I'm going to give you a few opinions right there. Like, I think there has never been a better opportunity to be a small firm, because a small firm now with AI can do 10 times or 100 times more than a mid-sized firm or a big firm, right? So I'm
right,
going to take a step back, and you had asked, hey, where do you see the biggest opportunities for AI in tax, right? And the biggest opportunities I see is starting with automating the grunt work, the data entry, the reconciliation, the document collection, form preparation, right? Like those tasks that are very repetitive and high tasks that traditionally would be outsourced, like they can
right.
now be done by AI while you, as an top advisor, advise your clients, right? So I think we're at a point where we're going from just using ChatGPT to ask questions and getting answers, like, as you say, a glorified Google, to a
Right.
place where the interfaces are getting so user friendly that you will be able to connect point A to point B. For example, using a note AI, like a note taker on your Zoom calls to do something like, hey, help me qualify the client, help me take the notes, help me send a proposal, send me review proposals, help me chase the client, which is where accountants spend the most time, like chasing the client for information, missing information, reviewing documents, like all of that. I think it's where we're at. Like it's a phase where we're going from just getting answers to automating flows, like
Right.
and then eventually you'll be able to stitch them together until you have the full flow. Like and I see an opportunity of accountants being in the middle, as a human in the loop. Like, hey, augmenting their powers to do the repetitive work. That's what I see the most. And how I see
Yeah.
this translating into the taxpayer is like, eventually you as a solo firm will be able to provide the same level of service that a big four can offer, but at a tenth of the price, right?
Right. Yeah. I guess that's where I was like originally. I think my fear was obviously, like, is this going to take my job? That's everybody's fear with technology. It's like, is this going to like replace me? But then, you start thinking about like, what is it actually replacing at the end of the day? And I guess we have some flexibility on how we want to use it, obviously. So I think it's less about like replacing yourself, but you also have to, it is going to replace some aspect of the process. I think that's the part that, like, because I'm always obsessed with processes with my firm.
Yeah.
It's always been nailing down the process, but it's always been very manual. Like if you think about it, I have a person, I have a person taking the leads from clients, and then having the phone call, and then it's an email to somebody to send the engagement, and one step after the other. It requires multiple people, or with a small firm like me, it's me doing a lot
Yeah.
of different things, and so that's where like automating these processes is obviously very beneficial. But the struggle for me is like, at what point do you jump into this as a professional? Like
Yeah.
like, because I have gotten to where I feel like I waste a lot of time just trying to figure out how I can make AI take over something when it's like, all right, I should have just done it,
Yeah.
or like, do you wait for that perfect product to just appear and then you just use that product, or do you
Yeah.
build something customized for yourself? I mean, to me, that's kind of where I am, like, just being honest with my firm. It's like trying to figure out where I fit in the evolution of this product and when do I want to make a jump and how big of a jump, you know?
Yeah. I think I can give you my product vision on that. And after, like, we're currently working with several design partners, and we've figured out a couple things. So the first one is, yes, it can be overwhelming to say, yes, we want to implement AI, but how and in what parts of the process, or even calling it a process, right? Like, I think that
Right.
if you take a step back and you choose a task, that is a better place to start. Sorry.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
imagine like saying, hey, email drafting really takes a lot of time when I do, for example, a request, right? Because I have to write 100 emails. Okay, just use AI or an automation with AI to replace that task. And then once you've mastered it, go to the other one. Like, is this document extraction? Like, for example, I don't know, maybe you're using a desktop application instead of an online application, and you have to go take all the client's bank statements and extract them. Like, okay, get just one tool or mini tool that will help you do that process. And then when you add them up, and especially if those solutions talk between each other, then you'll be implementing AI much faster. Like I think
I see.
it'll be
So
faster to.
you're gonna take it task by task and then figure out how to link it together is another
Yeah,
way.
that's my take right now. Because what I've seen is when you try to have everything, then you don't excel at anything, right? Like
Yeah. Because I mean it's a constant improvement too.
it's a
It's like
constant. And
you create a process, you automate it, and then you start figuring out it's like, oh, I need to like here's a variation on of a whatever you're doing, like a sale, like an information request or something that we need to add into it so it learns it. It's a
yeah,
constant improvement.
which I think it's the challenge that softwares like practice management softwares have, right? Like they try to do everything and then the customer needs to adapt things and they can't, or like, and I mean, that's my take today. And this AI thing is being built, it's been probably 2, 3, or 4 years that this has been happening. And in the tax industry, I would say one, maximum two.
Yeah. I mean, 4 years ago, this wasn't even a thought in my mind.
Exactly.
It's like,
Exactly.
one thing that's interesting too, like shifting to from like a taxpayer's perspective, like how do you know, one thing that's always that kind of bothers me a little bit about AI is like there's always been this taboo on outsourcing, or it feels like that from a tax like a professional perspective. So like, a taxpayer, if they feel like their work is being outsourced, they feel like it's a cheapened service, which is understandable. But if you're replacing that outsourcing with technology, for some reason that's perfectly fine. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but from a taxpayer's perspective, like what are the risks and how do you know? Because I guess the first step I've seen other firms take, and I'm interested to see like where you think firms are like in this process, like a smaller firm. But what I've seen is that firms are really the first step they're using with this is helping lower level staff with research and and responding to clients. So it's like these people, like it used to be, if somebody asks one of my lower staff people a question that they don't know the answer to, they come to me and I help them create that response. But now what firms are doing is they have a chat bot that they've trained and learned, and now the lower level person is using that to get an answer, putting together a response and emailing it to the client. So like if
Yeah.
you're a taxpayer, that makes you a little nervous because you can't tell like what's going on there. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of the ways I guess I'm trying to point out like some places that as a taxpayer you may want to like be aware, maybe questions you want to ask firms. Like
Yeah.
if you're signing up with a firm, it's like how are you using AI and technology like to help me
Yeah.
with the tax return? I think that's a legitimate question to start asking if you're signing up with someone.
I think that's a fair concern, but I can share what I have seen, both from the taxpayer perspective and from the firms. So
Yeah.
the first thing I'd like to say is that there's a trusted relationship between the client and the CPA that cannot be replaced. It cannot be replaced by AI and it cannot be replaced by outsourcing, right? Like if I
Yeah.
hire Alex, I'm trusting Alex. And ultimately, when you sign my tax return, like you're liable for it. So that's why I trust you. So
Right.
the
Right.
first thing that I would say is like, even though there's technology, the taxpayer trusts the CPA, which is why I think the CPA should spend as much time as they can with the client, because that's where trust is being built.
Mhm.
The second thing I think about AI as a taxpayer, like coming from the taxpayer perspective as well, is I think it really depends what I perceive that the AI is doing, right? Like, do I think that there's a black box where you throw all my documents and nobody's supervising that or reviewing that and it's getting filed and you're not liable for it? Like, I would be scared. But
Right.
if I see a firm that is using AI to check calculations, make things faster, do reviews, like answer complex questions based on their own firm's knowledge, right? Because if you have other 100 customers that have similar like backgrounds or like structures or like things like mine, I want you to be efficient and be able to respond faster or whatever. So I think that the key component here is maintaining the trust between the CPA and the person and letting this person know that you're in charge, not the AI.
Right.
Like the AI is helping you out.
And
And
maybe
then,
transparency, like letting them, because I agree, like there's definitely a good and useful way to use technology for outsourcing, and if you're using that and you have this trusted relationship to provide a better service, which is
yeah,
obviously what you should be doing,
yeah,
as a professional. I mean, then yeah, I agree. But
yeah.
maybe letting people know that, you know,
And I think there are three things that firms using AI could tell or could share with their clients that they're putting in place to keep that trust. So for example, the first one is, hey, where's my data going? Is this going to, I don't know, an open AI or like Anthropic? Like, is my data being used by a third party? And it's no, there can be local models that are only run by the firm and cannot be accessed by anybody else. Those are encrypted. They have encryption protocols, like you can assure the data is safe and like not shared
let,
with anybody else.
let's stop on that one for a second, because I think that's a really important point. Like, I guess, can you
Uh-huh.
briefly explain the difference between open and closed AI?
Yeah. So when you use a chat GPT, like the public one or like the $20 one, which is the pro, like they tell
Yeah.
you, look, whatever you share, don't share confidential data because we might be using this to train our model to get better. But
Right.
when you're in the enterprise mode that you're using their API, you can tell them, hey, this data cannot be shared with anybody else. It can only be used by me. And then you get a version of the large language model that only works for you. So the data
Okay.
doesn't go anywhere else. Like your data is secure and it's safe. But you got to tell that to the client, right? Like it's not obvious. You got to tell the client, like, look, this is how we're handling our AI, right? So
Right.
that's the first.
So you're saying there are options, like even with Chat GPT, where you
Mhm.
can drop private information into that and it stays within your network. It's not
Yeah,
like,
imagine like your private environment. If we put
right.
it in like simpler
But
terms.
it's
Yeah.
still pulling from information that's not in your private environment, or do you have to tell it what information it's pulling from? Or it could be either way, I
No,
guess.
it can be either way, but what's not going to happen is that private data that you have is not going to share or travel anywhere else. It's just going to stay with you. So imagine it's like Alex is an AI. He can come here, take a look at the firm's binder, but then he's not going to take it anywhere else, you know?
Right, right.
So that's how it happens. So the second, like speaking about transparency, the second thing that I think firms can do or softwares like ours that we're developing do is show an audit trail. What was done by AI? What was reviewed by humans? So for example, this data was extracted by AI on Monday, January the 1st at this time, and it was approved by Alex. Okay. And you see the whole audit trail just in
Mhm.
case you need to go back and check. And you can tell it to the client if they ask for it, at least have it,
Uh,
and then this third one that I see super interesting or important is just you can assure the client that there's a human in the loop. There's someone from your team reviewing each step before moving to the next one. And I
right.
think those three will build a confidence. Like what I've seen is I've heard taxpayers saying like AI doesn't make mistakes. AI doesn't make data entry mistakes, right? Which can
Right.
cause like penalties, high penalties, specifically in international tax, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, I mean, the more that the manual and mathematical stuff is done uh, by a computer, I think it weeds out a lot of like unintentional errors, you know.
Yeah.
That's always been the case. Like use copy and paste instead of keying in the number directly. But yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it definitely needs a human review. So I agree. Like
Yeah.
showing transparency and the workflow would
I
make sense.
think if we could make a similar metaphor, like imagine we're at the same moment in history where we got from written ledgers to Excel, right? Like Microsoft Excel. And
Yeah,
nobody
yeah.
doubts now that Excel can calculate things correctly, right? I think
Right.
the same is going to happen with AI. Like now we're in a spreadsheet and then we're going to be doing things or calculations with AI and we're just going to trust that it does the correct thing. I think we're right there as well.
Yeah. No, that's a great metaphor. Yeah, it's just, and it's happening at a rapid pace, obviously,
Yeah.
and yeah, I guess one thing I've been curious about. So, I mean, clearly one of the uses of, I guess, taking a step back from a taxpayer's perspective, I kind of agree. And I think you said the same thing that maybe the most simplistic case, there is a way it is going to replace like the need for an accountant in some cases. Like maybe with a tax return at some point, if you have a basic tax return, it could just prepare the tax return. But, if you have some complexity or, I guess it could replace like the TurboTax situation, I don't know. But
Yeah,
what
I
do you
don't
think
think so.
about
Like,
it? What do you think about that? About it replacing the need for an accountant in general?
look, I don't think so. Like, and let me give you another piece of information. In the previous startup that I worked at, like before founding my own company, we wanted to replace accountants. And for 3 years we tried. And the main challenge that we had was the trusted relationship between the accountant and the client. Why? Because many
I think
times the
you are
accountant,
having to review what happened
yeah,
in
like
there.
people don't want to self-service themselves in things that they think they will have huge liability first. And then second, humans or clients want a trusted advisor advising them. Because I was going to say this, most of the times or many times, your accountant knows more about you than your wife or your husband or your family because they know about your money movements, they know about your relationships, they know about you moving countries, companies. So at the end, I think even though AI could do it all and people could do it by themselves, they will still want somebody to take the liability or advise them in a better way because
Right.
they got their own businesses, they got their own lives. I mean, their core business is not doing their own accounting for themselves. So,
Right.
especially when it comes to companies, I don't see AI taking over the profession at all.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it could change the relationship between accountants and taxpayers or whatever in a good way, in that,
Yeah.
like, there's a lot of clients I work with now that I don't really talk to that much. I just do their tax return and I send it to them, and that's good. And maybe that would stay the same, but I think as I'm able to automate more, I can do that cheaper, and the market's going to correct, right? Like it's going to, like a basic tax return is going to become cheaper because we're able to automate more from a firm side. So that's just
Yeah.
going to allow me to say, hey, well, how can we make your tax liability better? Let's
Yeah.
meet once a quarter or something and talk about what you have going on. So I think it creates the ability to have a more personalized relationship. Whereas now, if I'm spending 60% of my time, inputting numbers or something that
Yeah.
can be automated, it's not possible for me to have that personalized relationship with all of my clients.
Yeah. And taking a step back, let me tell you some things that I do see becoming a reality from the taxpayer's perspective. So, first of all, they're going to expect smarter and self-serve experiences. Like, hey, don't ask me via email the same things that I've answered in the 3 previous years. Like, I expect you to automatically check all of that and only ask me what you need. Like, they will want, like, they will expect your firm to remember more about them, right? And have like a profile, like, hey, don't ask me the same thing that I told you, like the relationships, my structures, my everything. Like, just I want you to remember that the same way a ChatGPT remembers things about me, right? Like, I
Right,
think
right,
that's gonna happen. Like, second, I think that they will ask better and smarter questions, and probably even think that they know more than they actually do, right? Because they will be just a ChatGPT away from trying to say, hey, what's the best structure for me if I'm in Costa Rica or I'm in the US or in Brazil? Like, ChatGPT is going to say something and they're,
I've been amazed at some of the people coming to me with that I mean, clearly that know a lot more than
or
they have a danger or think they know more. Yeah,
I
exactly.
think they know more.
Sometimes,
Exactly.
which, I mean, it's fine. It makes it for a more interesting conversation. But to me, it provides more value from my perspective because I'm able to say, look, you understand this complicated thing, but this is what you're missing. Or
Uh-huh.
maybe they're right, and I can confirm it and
Yeah.
show them how to implement it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that changed. Whereas before, I was having to explain I was the chat GBT, like starting at the
Yeah.
beginning, but now they're
Yeah.
coming to me like with, yeah, much more like nuanced understanding of,
Yeah.
maybe not understanding, but like, yeah, the terminology and things like that. Like they know we could have a deeper conversation. I guess
Yeah.
that's kind of the point. I'm
Yeah.
able to have a deeper, more technical conversation with clients that before I wasn't
Yeah.
having.
Yeah. And
Just
I
being,
also think just because ChatGPT makes answers on demand so fast that they will start expecting that from their expert advisors as well. Like, hey, I want an answer and I want it now, like in
right.
30 minutes. Which is why I think if you're not ultra efficient in your own firm, you won't have the time to answer to that client, but somebody else will. Because other CPA will be using AI like that for sure.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, in my experience, there's two main ways you lose a client. One
Uh-huh.
is, and one of the main ones is slow to respond. You know, like that's, I mean, there's price, obviously, but then, or if you make mistakes, but yeah, so I agree that response time is going to
Response
start
time.
slowing down for more complicated things. Like in the past, somebody asks a complicated question. It's like, let me put together a memo for you. This will take 4 to 6 weeks. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like they're going to send me what they think is right. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to change the way that you respond to more complicated questions. I don't think we've figured that out yet as a
Yeah.
profession because that part is still evolving. Um, but
Yeah, I'm,
yeah,
I'm I'm curious. In your view, what's the most overlooked trend in tax today, like that firms need to prepare for?
yeah. I mean, I think that communication is probably the biggest one in information gathering, you know, like that's kind of where I'm stuck right now. Is like, I think that's where a lot of firms are going to start losing out is well, like clunky information gathering processes, you know, where
Yeah,
like there's a lot of manual thing. You're sending people Excels to fill out or whatever, you know, just stuff that's taking taxpayers a lot of time to fill out. I think smoothing that out is one of the biggest opportunities, but also a bigger pitfall because, and that's where I don't know, you know, like bigger firms are going to adopt that sort of thing quicker, I
Mhm.
think, but I mean, not necessarily, yes, but
I think. Look, what I've seen, and we're focused on just small and mid-sized practices, and what I've seen is that small firms can move like a rapid boat, while big firms like they need to they have a long decision making process, a bunch of decision makers involved. Like they just need to move slower by nature. So I think
right,
there's a great opportunity. I see a lot of people trying to implement AI. They just don't know how or where to implement it, which is
right,
taking a step back. Like I would say, just start with automating a simple task. Like, hey, every time I get an email, auto reply with a draft or like auto prepare a draft for me to review. And then every morning when you wake up, you just review drafts and then you edit it and send, right?
right.
Until you
Yeah,
feel in a place comfortable enough to like an AI taking over your email, or I don't know. I'm just thinking like take one task.
yeah. I mean, I started my firm in a lot of small firms, like in the international space, in particular. Like my whole concept is that I'm trying to provide a a service that has the technical expertise of a big firm because that's where I used to work, that's where I got my experience, but also the efficiency of a small firm. Like that's
Yeah,
where, like if I'm looking at my competition as big firms, that's where I set myself apart. But a big firm is going to start using technology to try and gain on that efficiency in a way, you know? And so they're going to be coming back to, I look at it as like a race, you know?
yeah,
Like they're
yeah,
going to be gaining on that efficiency. So like what I need to do is also, you know, be
yeah,
using the technology for the efficiency, but I can gain on them from a technical perspective because now I have at my hands, instead of having to purchase a $20,000 research subscription that I'm
yeah,
going to have to train my team to learn how to read tax code. I mean, all that's still important, but to be able to find an answer at the tip of their fingers and us talk about it and send it to a client quickly. I
yeah.
mean, that's never been something that small firms have been able to do, you know, with these
Until now.
really until now. Exactly. Like
Yeah,
before, that was the big, like if you had really technical, difficult questions, you needed to go to a big firm in most cases because yeah, maybe somebody like me could get you that answer, but I'm only one person, whereas a big
Yeah.
firm, my whole team is not going to have that same, technical.
Yeah.
But now, so I mean, yeah, it's a race, and not a race, but like
It
we
is.
can. I mean, it is. We'll
I don't
see.
know if you've heard about this, the classical dilemma. Like, will the challengers get the innovation first, or will the incumbents get the innovation first, or will the challengers get the distribution first? Because
Yeah,
like
right.
the small firm needs to grow, like get the clients before the big ones implement the AI, like in at scale.
Exactly.
And that's the race. And honestly, I envision a world where more people will come from like big firms and start their solo practices, just because AI will enable them to work
Right.
faster than the
We're
bigger
already
firms.
seeing that. We're already seeing
Yeah,
that in a lot of places. Like I think bigger firms are having trouble hiring
yeah,
for the reason, and they're losing some of the top talents. Like I always thought, kind of private equity was going to be the end of a lot of this type of work, but the higher interest rate environment, I think, is going to has killed that in a way, and will continue to.
yeah.
But like, uh, another thing I'm curious your thoughts on is there's one like we've been focusing on how accounting firms are using technology to provide better service, drive down costs, do more better work, which is what I'm focused on, obviously. But what about firms like banks and financial institutions and things like that? Because I guess the way I see it going, what I'm trying to do is I want to consolidate. Like it used to be, I would just do the international tax work. There might be another accountant doing bookkeeping, another accountant doing their actual tax return, but
Yeah.
that doesn't lend itself well to the use of technology because data is scattered around in different places. So, like to me, it's
Yeah.
better if I'm able to do bookkeeping and the tax return and the international planning. I have all this data to give more information, provide a better service. But
Yeah.
think not like who has equally amount of data, your banking institution.
Yeah.
'Cause I
Yeah.
think my fear, if I'm like worried about somebody taking my job, it's the banks, not
Uh-huh.
accounting firms. You know what I'm saying? I'm curious what you
Wow.
think.
So I'm having a lot of thoughts right now. Like the first one is, I think banks are ahead of in many ways. Like they have huge data sets, they can do a lot more things, but they're still very reliant in manual processes as well, and they're very like siloed in between areas. But I do see some neo banks or like digital banks trying to go into accounting fields. Like I don't know if you've
Right.
seen Mercury Bank or if you've seen Brex in the US. They're
Yeah.
starting to even do the automated bookkeeping from their own like transaction ledgers, right? Like
Yeah.
the second they get a transaction, they provide an out of category that the accountant can either review, change, or delete, and they can push it into their QuickBooks or like the Zero, like whatever they use. So I think that the newer banks are thinking about this, like how can they embed themselves, like how can they embed accounting processes within the banks themselves, and especially
Right.
in countries like the US where open banking is so good that you can connect multiple banks to a solution.
Right.
Um, but I honestly, like my perception is that they're doing this so that they can differentiate themselves from other banks, not because they want to take over the accountants, right? Like I just
Right.
see them as adding this, as adding a moat to their products. But I do see like the digital banks going into accounting, like accounting stuff at least, like account
Right.
payables, receivables, like some automations that they will still push into your QuickBooks or your whatever your bookkeeping software is.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I guess I was just thinking of it as what's stopping them from creating a link to a tax software process or something like that, where they're providing tax return preparation services, and then
Yeah.
banks take over the world.
No, I think they're very focused on their core business. Like their core
Yeah.
business is lending money and receiving money, period. And then everything in between. I think there's a lot to do there. And I see use cases for AI there, identifying fraud or like analyzing transactions, patterns. Like I think they're more focused on this side of the business, like assessing risk and all of that, and not like it's a different business model, I
Plus,
think.
plus you have different banks. I mean, that's the other thing. Like if I think about one of my clients that has they operate in like 6 different countries. They have bank accounts in 6 different countries. Like it's not
Yeah.
like one bank can do like has all your information. It's
Yeah.
me that has all their information, with
Yeah.
all, so like that. Um, yeah, that's the other way of looking at it. But yeah, I was curious if
Yeah.
you're seeing like a growth in like the financial sector related to AI in the same
So
way that you see it in the accounting, or if it's just a different model altogether.
I think it's different business models. I might be wrong. All of this is very new, but I will tell
Um,
you what I'm seeing and what we're implementing. So at Taxflow, especially in the US, that there's good open banking. We have been able to connect multiple banks to get the bank statements from different clients, extract the info, and give you a first pass of what the categorization is. But what we think is for you to review as an accountant.
yeah.
So I think those kind of solutions that become kind of like an octopus that can like connect to different banks and give you the like the command center where you can see all of the financial data from your customer. I think
Mhm.
those kind of solutions will start emerging, but I don't see the banks themselves doing that. I see third parties like us doing that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, makes sense. All right, cool. Well, I guess give us a little bit more about tax flow, like what you're working on now, what your next steps are, and of course how people can reach out to you if they have questions about tax flow or want to work with you.
Yeah, of course. So we're focusing mainly on three things. Data intake. So preparing all the information requests in bulk from previous year's tax returns. So imagine, Alex, you come to our platform, TaxFlow, you just drag and drop the previous year's tax return from the customer, and boom, you got an email with like personalized for this person with all the documents that you need. And this AI previously checked the client binder, so it's not going to ask for what it already has. So that's the first thing in bulk. The second one is we're working on an agent to do tax prep. So once you have 50 documents, you just throw them all in, and then all of that gets reviewed, extracted, and put into your work papers. This could be any Excel template, right? Like to, especially in international tax, you got work papers that are very complex, like complex calculations between each other. Like we're doing that. And the last one is an agent that can do data entry. So once you have the work paper completed, you can just take that same work paper, that Excel that your firm uniquely uses, drag and drop it, and then this agent can open your tax software and go to the exact same field where you need to input the info and put it for you. Of course, it needs to previously be trained. So we're doing those three agents. If people want to reach us out, we're San Francisco based, and you can reach us at jointaxflow.ai.
All
And
right.
happy to help you. Like, we'll start with tasks. That's my advice to everybody hearing this podcast. If you're an accountant, a CPA, start
Right.
with tasks.
Yeah, because that's what overwhelms me. I start thinking about, all right, I need to update all of my processes right now, fire
Yeah.
everybody and have a, no, find a task, update it one at a time, and
One at a
see how
time.
you can use your team to provide more value without having to
Exactly.
do that task. Um, all right, very cool. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, and it was interesting to hear your perspective on, where things are going. It's a constantly evolving thing, so maybe we check back in like 6 months or something and see what's
We
changed
will.
in the industry. Probably
Ma-
change. Come back in a month and see what's changed in the industry.
Correct,
Uh,
correct. And maybe we can even do a demo for the audience, like show them how this works.
yeah, yeah. No, that sounds awesome.
Okay.
All right,
Cool,
cool. Well,
Alex.
great.
Thank you for the invite and see you around.
All right. Likewise. See you later.